That's great, man.
This is a dumb joke? What? That I'm the best husband? That's the joke?
I'm glad. I'm glad.
Is that the joke?
You might be speaking from jealousy.
He's just mad he didn't get a Baby Yoda cup.
That's stupid.
Do you-
That is stupid. Welcome back to the show. Daniel, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a snowy Monday. You may be watching this on another day. But
It's kind of
for
a
us,
slushy Monday at this
yeah,
point.
It's pretty nasty out there.
Yeah, it's gross.
First, I have to point out, that's a great mug.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's
Thank
really
you. This
cute.
is my.
What does it say?
It says Yoda best husband.
Oh.
Love you, I do.
But it's got
It has Grogu on there. Yes.
who's not Yoda.
Is
but
not
it still
Yoda.
says Yoda best.
Yep.
It's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool.
Yoda best host.
Thank you, Daniel.
so you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Hey, so we are continuing the show. We had a little tweener this week for Valentine's Day called Blank Thy Neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we had to be not in person again.
I know.
After specifically last week, I said,
You did say.
hopefully I don't have to say welcome back again, because after COVID and different COVID shutdowns and all that kind of stuff, we were finally back in person, feeling like, hey, it's mid-February. We're well on our way to just meeting in person for good this time without any, getting hit sideways kind of closures. And here we are.
Sideways.
But, yeah.
And you
very
predicted
much.
it.
I did.
Little do people know, maybe, Timmy's actually a closet meteorologist.
I am.
So I was texting back and forth with him.
And what that means essentially is I
Tell
spent
us.
way too much time looking at the weather over the last several days. And honestly, I'm tired. I think today I'm just going to have a nice nap.
But so you made a bet with youth, though, right?
Yeah.
If we didn't get anywhere from, was it 2 to 12 inches of snow?
Yeah, it's 3 to 12 inches.
3 to 12 inches of snow, that you would shave your head and your beard?
Right. And thankfully,
How'd we do?
although I did get my ears lowered this week,
Yeah.
we got, I think, 10 and a half inches here at the church officially. So,
I got to tell you, I was secretly rooting for 13.
Oh, I'm sure you were. So yeah, it was okay. I came out unscathed. I just did get a nice haircut and not a goofy one. So that's good. A couple years ago, I lost a bet and had to have a question mark shaved in my face.
It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was awkward. And then afterwards, I had to shave my face completely, which I hadn't done
That
in
was
many
more
years.
awkward than the question mark, I think.
That was weird. It was uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
so we're continuing our show here, talking about this series, or this quick little tweener we did.
Yeah.
Blank Your Neighbor. And it talked, in your message, you talked a lot about what it means to treat our neighbors as God wants us to, which is sometimes a tall order. I really like what you had to say about that love. You shared your story about Brandy, proposing to Brandy, and how love causes you to take risks. And I thought that was really fun. But thinking about how we typically treat our neighbors, why is it that we are so easily gravitated towards the easy way to treat our neighbors, which isn't the right way necessarily? I mean, what is it? We often have neighbors that they do things that just don't sit well with us. They frustrate us. We can get really petty with it and arguing. What is it that just makes us, I guess, love our neighbors less than we ought to?
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned this. It's easy to love someone who loves you because your emotions are supporting the action that you're about to take, right? So if you have someone who you really care about and you have an opportunity to respond to something they've done, good or bad, your emotions, your feelings towards them kind of drive you, oftentimes, not all the time, but towards the right decision. Where when someone hurts you, or when someone rubs you the wrong way, or frustrates you, or you don't see eye to eye, or you just can't relate to them, it's a lot easier for your emotions and your feelings to drive you to do the wrong thing or something that's hurtful. And so I think there's a lot of emotions at play in that type of, I guess, situation. And so that can be hard when our emotions are telling us to do one thing, but we know that the right thing is the opposite of what we're feeling.
Sure.
That's hard to, I guess, separate our feelings or emotions from our actions. A lot of times we allow our feelings and emotions to dictate what we do. And as I think all of us can say, we've experienced times where our feelings and emotions are challenging us to do something that we know is not healthy, not right, not helpful.
Right.
And really, I think it comes down to we have a tendency to be selfish.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to act based on what will benefit us the most, us personally, rather than considering the needs of others first, which is something Paul encourages and challenges us to do, is to consider the needs of others above our own. That was in Philippians. We talked about that at the beginning of our last series. And that's just hard to do. We're naturally drawn towards what benefits us and what's going to be better for us, what's going to cause us to gain something, or what's going to prevent us from losing something.
Right.
So I think that has a huge basis to do, or a huge that plays a huge role in how we respond to our neighbors.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. I think what your ultimate takeaway, if you haven't watched the message, go back and do so. But your ultimate, I guess, takeaway was that until we see people the way Jesus sees them, with the value that He puts on them, we're basically destined to fail in the loving your neighbor, even though we're going to fail regardless, just because, I mean, that's just a difficult thing.
Yeah.
Not to say that we shouldn't try, but until we put the value on the people in our lives, we won't treat them according to that value.
It's interesting. You treat something physical, at least an object or a possession or something. Oftentimes we treat it with care to the degree of value that we place on it. Whether it's how much money we spent on it, how much money someone else spent on it. I borrowed a car yesterday for most of the day from our neighbor because we don't have an all-wheel drive, and we were doing a wedding after service and just had a bunch of stuff to run around in town doing. And I drove that thing a lot differently than I drive my own car because someone else placed a lot
of... You drove it hard, right?
No. I didn't. I was super careful.
It's different when you get a rental car.
It's different when you get a rental car. But what you treat something of immense value with immense care.
Right.
And so if we recognize the value that God placed on our neighbor, when we recognize that He placed immense value on our neighbor, we're going to make decisions through that filter, and we're going to treat them a heck of a lot differently than we would if otherwise, if we didn't realize how much value God had placed on them.
Right. I always tell youth kids that we treat ourselves, or we treat others the way we see ourselves, or the way we see others, and it can unfortunately play into some pretty dark things because we allow the values that people have put on us to determine what we believe we're worth, and then when you then believe that you're worth less or worthless, you'll go ahead and treat something like it's worthless. So you take your body and run it through all sorts of things. You subject your mind, and you put all sorts of things in your body that you normally wouldn't if you looked at yourself as someone who was valuable,
right? Because
you believe that you're not of value.
Right.
And so when we start seeing ourselves, we start seeing people the way that Jesus does, it has to change that, which is pretty awesome and key to so much. And even, I guess, you would probably see good people, kind of people that are good, kind of run through this filter of like, what is the right thing to do in a situation? When it comes to interacting with your neighbors, you'll see them say like, well, what is the right thing to do? But honestly, that answer so often is like, well, what's the bare minimum I can do? And going to the story with the guy that showed up to Jesus and had asked him like, hey, who's my neighbor? Or what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? And he was looking for the kind of bare minimum, like, what do I have to do to just get by, right? Yeah. Which really is the wrong question. But so often we do that, or other people, that they'll say, hey, what is the right thing to do here? Oftentimes the right thing in their mind is, well, what's the bare minimum? If your neighbor's like needing something, it's like, I'll help enough to where I don't look like a jerk or something like that. Yeah. But not as much. Let's talk about, what does Jesus actually say about that as far as what is the right thing to do?
Well, even continuing the story, so the part you're talking about is when the man comes to Jesus and says, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus' response is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. That's the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it, so it's equally important, but the order matters, right? Love God first. The second is just as important, and it's love your neighbor as yourself. You continue that story, you continue reading, and the man responds to Jesus and says, well, who's my neighbor? Like, is that anybody? Is that everybody? Like, who's my neighbor? Who do I have to love? If I have to love my neighbor as myself, then who is that? And Jesus tells the famous story of the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan, right? We've named organizations after that.
Right,
And
hospitals. And,
yeah. The Samaritan is the man who walks up upon someone who has been beaten, been robbed. And this is Jesus' example of what it looks like to love our neighbor. And the Samaritan takes the man who was in the ditch and he bandages his wounds. He puts him in a hotel, a safe place to stay and to sleep. He pays for the hotel for that night. And he basically tells the hotel person, hey, take care of this guy, give him what he needs, and put whatever the balance is at the end of his care on my tab. That's what it really looks like practically, is whatever I can do to help, I don't want it to be at any cost to this individual. And that's the example Jesus gives. And then he goes and lives that example out, right? So Jesus has done the same thing with us. For those of us who have accepted Jesus and said, hey, I'm surrendered to you, he has picked us up out of the ditch, bandaged our wounds, and set us in a place of protection under his care. And he says, from here until the day you die, whatever bill you rack up from here until now, put it on my tab at the cross.
Yeah.
And then Jesus' command is love like that. So the answer to your question is scary. It's anything and everything. And we've been called to do that to the best of our ability. But I think the key is, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of you, but the key is to recognize, kind of to go back to our kind of some stuff you were touching on, the key is to realize first our immense value. That's what Jesus is saying. Love God first. Recognize the incredible love that God has for you, which is it's exemplified in the cross. That's where we get our value, that Jesus gave his life for us.
Right.
That's how valuable we are. That's how valuable you are to God. That's how valuable I am to God. And when we recognize that, then we allow that to overflow out of our lives.
Right. And that value is truly something that can't be quantified by any monetary anything. So it goes
billions, trillions, none of it's equal. So
yeah, that's incredible. And it's difficult too, because I have conversations a lot with people who they ask, well, how should I react in this situation? I have a friend or a family member who's really struggling. How far should I go?
Right.
And that's always that question. It never, the answer that I give is never the answer that they want to hear.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, how far should I go? It's like, well, how far did Jesus go for you? Which is like,
I hate that.
There's your answer.
Yeah, right.
It's not easy, I know, and it's
hard.
not natural. And I think we, even as Christians, as religious people, we get so caught up in our own stuff, even ministry, like the doing of the ministry and the busyness of the ministry, that sometimes we miss the Samaritan laying on the side of the road, where we're just as religious people. And if you remember the story right before that, two people passed by, two people that should have been...
Two religious leaders.
Exactly, people that you would expect to help someone in need. And instead, they had more important things to do. And they said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and pass on by.
On the other side of the road.
Right.
Avoiding the whole
I
thing.
feel like we do that a lot as Christians, where we'll leave, people that we maybe should have spent more time with or time on, situations where we know we could have helped, but we just don't have the time, or say we don't have the time, or make up an excuse or come up with an excuse as to why, or we've already helped them enough, we can't help them anymore. And as I say, this is convicting to me too, just because it's like, that's the bar is so incredibly high. And we're asked to, love our neighbor, those people that we come into contact with. and to give of ourselves, give of our time, give of our resources
Yeah.
to ensure that they're safe and well. And
Well, even as you're kind of talking, and I'm thinking more about the question too, like what is it really, the question of what does it look like to love like that? And I think about the story that Jesus tells, which is a parable. So it's a fictional story to illustrate some deep truth. The two religious leaders passed by the man who's on the side of the road, who's bleeding and broken, and they pass by because they know that to stop and to help that situation would cost them something. It would cost them their ceremonial cleanliness, right? It could cost them the time they're supposed to be at the temple for whatever reason, to be there for a sacrifice to be made or whatever, right? So it's going to cost them something. The Samaritan looks at that situation and is willing at whatever cost to help and to show love. And that's a big deal. So when I think about, how far do we go? Well, if it doesn't cost you something to help, you probably haven't gone far enough.
yeah,
If our concern is how much it will cost us, and we're unwilling for it to cost us something, then we probably haven't gone far enough.
yeah,
Whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's energy, whether it's saying no to something we really would like to do in order to say yes to supporting and loving someone the way Jesus loved us, we may need to check our motives and ask God, what are you asking me to give up? What should this cost me
yeah.
in order to be able to help this person the way you've called me or asked me to help and support?
Right. Yeah, I think one of the most common arguments I hear is, and we talk about it in our small group and stuff like that, someone who has like a monetary need, someone who's poor, someone, especially with like the homeless crisis going on, it's like, well, how much should I help them? Well, they're just going to spend it on drugs. They're going to just, they're not going to, they've already been helped enough. They don't need what I have to give them or whatever. And they go through this whole like justifying of like why I shouldn't have to help them. And you go back to the story and Jesus purposely uses a Jew and a Samaritan.
Yep.
Who like you think that you have it kind of this weird awkward tension with homeless people or whatever for most people that are just like, I'm just gonna walk on the other side of the road. I don't want to have to like engage with this person at all. These two people didn't talk. Jews saw Samaritans as like subhuman.
Yep.
And that's all because they like worshiped in different ways and stuff like that. But for, hundreds, if not thousands of years, they had treated these Samaritans as people that they just didn't engage with each other. And so to use a Jew and a Samaritan, and they would have known that, that was a Jew in the ditch and they helped anyway. And so to answer the question of, well, should I help that poor person or to what lengths should I go? It's like Jesus is purposely using the people that wouldn't ever engage with each other. So if you look at someone and saying, hey, this is so far outside my comfort zone, this person doesn't deserve my help. It's like, yeah, but you didn't deserve God's help. You didn't deserve Jesus coming to earth for you. It's like that's not the criteria
That's not the measurement
to give help.
Right.
And so we have to look at it that way. And it's like, it makes the answer to our question simple, but incredibly difficult at the same time.
Right.
It's like the answer is easy. You don't really have to like give your exact scenario to someone else to run it by them to see like, should I help this person? It's like, well, the answer is yes, you should.
Yeah. Right.
Which is hard.
It is hard.
I'm just as guilty
really
as anybody,
hard.
but that's the answer.
And and it is to help, it is to respond. And it's just as important to keep the balance to respond out of an overflow of the love that God has for you. And just seeing people through the perspective of everyone is someone, and everyone is someone for whom Jesus died.
Right.
And everyone is somebody who matters to God. That includes me, and that includes my neighbor.
Yeah.
Whether I agree with them or disagree with them, whether we see eye to eye, whether we get along, whether they've kicked my dog or whatever, that's somebody for whom Jesus died. And that's an important thing to remember and an important filter.
Right. I think a great first step, if you're thinking like practical application, is realizing and accepting really what God says about you
Yeah.
as a person, and that
Yeah.
he died for you and that he loves you and he put this huge value on you. And then recognizing that that's not only true for you, but it's true for the you beside you,
Yep.
which is anybody else you come in contact with. And then you have to then treat them as such.
Yep.
And I mean, once you're able to do that, you're able to see the world as Jesus sees people, and you're able to see the brokenhearted and the people that are struggling like Jesus sees them.
It changes the way you respond to the need that's
Right.
put before you because
Absolutely.
you recognize that's somebody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. Well,
cool.
We're going to wrap up this segment, but real quick, we're going into a new series
Yes.
starting this next week,
Yep.
and that's going to continue through Easter. Can you believe it's already
That's crazy.
Easter? This year's gone by ridiculously slow and fast at the same time. I'm not sure how that's possible. But yeah, we're going into Easter here in the coming weeks. But tell us a little bit, give us a quick preview of this next series and what the viewer should expect.
Yeah, so this next series is called Bystander. It does lead us into the Easter season, and we're going to be walking through seven miracles that Jesus performs as recorded by John. And we're going to be walking through that and looking at the significance that these miraculous moments aren't just, they're not meant for the miraculous as much as they're intended to point the people who were there and us who would hear about it later. They're really intended to point us to the person of Jesus, that Jesus is in fact who he claimed to be, that they're more than just miraculous moments. They're massive pointers towards Jesus and who he is. It's called Bystander, and the reason why is because John was there. He was a bystander for these moments in Jesus' life, and he recorded them firsthand for us to see so that we can believe and trust the person of Jesus. So,
Great. Well,
yeah.
that sounds awesome.
It's
Looking
gonna be a lot of
forward to
fun.
it. So make sure you're here or you're tuning in the coming weeks because it's going to be great. Love you guys. Have an awesome week. Stay warm.
Yep. See you guys later.